Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host with another marvelous video. Step into the mysterious world of darkness and dread, where the boundary between the living and the undead blurs. Bram Stoker's masterpiece Dracula emerged from the shadows in 1897, etching its name in the annals of horror literature. But as the ink dried on the pages, another chapter began, one that would unfold on the silver screen. Cinema, a world of imagination bound only by the flickering frames of celluloid, breathed new life into Dracula. Yet, as the real fades and reality steps forward, we wonder, could Dracula be based on real events? Is there a connection to history hidden in folktales and old writings? Let's explore the sources that dare to mention this eternal villain. Join us as we dare to ask, was Dracula more than a creation of ink and imagination? Keep watching to find out. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Do not look back.
Dracula, mythology or reality? The age-old debate, was Dracula just a figment of imagination or historical reality? First off, let's dispel any doubts. Dracula wasn't some ethereal phantom, but there's a twist. The real Dracula wasn't your average blood-sucking supernatural being. No capes and fangs here. Instead, let's turn the clock back to the 15th century. There lived a Wallachian prince who became the star of this twisted modern legend. It all began when an Irishman named Bram Stoker dropped a literary bombshell in 1897 titled Dracula. In the eerie Castle Dracula, nestled in the heart of Transylvania, the novel talks about the Count, doomed by a curse, setting his sights on British shores in dire need of some fresh crimson nectar. But a brave band of vampire-savvy folks, led by Van Helsing, rises to the challenge. Garlic and stakes in hand, they duke it out with the Count, sparing England from the clutches of his curse. But I'm sure Stoker didn't conjure vampires out of thin air. Transylvania, that mysterious land, isn't just a figment of imagination. And the Count, well, he might have been rooted in history. You see, Stoker stirred his creative cauldron with European folklore and vampiric tales, brewing up his version. His secret ingredient, an essay titled Transylvania Superstitions, revealed a world where villagers whispered of evil spirits, ghosts, or strigoi. These creepy beings haunted the villages. By day, they played it cool, blending in with the living. But during the night, their souls would slip from their shells, causing all sorts of nighttime mayhem. Their reign of terror only crumbled at the crow of the first cock, as dawn's light washed their powers away. Believe it or not, Dracula's essence seems to have oozed from these local tales. Let's look at the tale of the Wallachian prince who straddled the line between history and horror. The real Vlad, also known as Dracula. Cast your minds back to the year 1431, in the heart of Transylvania, where Vlad emerged into the world. Vlad, or Dracula, was born into a noble family, his dad going by the moniker Dracul, that's dragon or devil in Romanian. Why, you ask? Well, Papa Dracul was part of the Order of the Dragon, a crew that went toe-to-toe with the Ottoman Empire. Dracula translates to son of Dracul in Romanian, effectively crowning young Vlad as the son of the dragon, or the son of the devil. And so, the seeds of the vampire legend started to sprout. Now, this was a time of ceaseless warfare. Transylvania stood between the Ottoman Turks and the Austrian Habsburgs like a gritty frontier. Vlad's father met a grim end, while his older brother, Mircea, endured a fate straight out of a vampire playbook, blinded with sizzling hot iron stakes and buried alive. Fast forward to when Dracula took the command, the Vatican once gave Vlad a nod of approval for his Christianity-defending intentions. Yet, his methods, well, let's just say they didn't make the papal cut. And that's when the moniker Vlad the Impaler sauntered into the scene. Impaling, that's his jam. He'd stick people on spikes, leaving them to suffer in agony, sometimes for days on end. And here's a stomach-churning detail. He'd sit down to meals right next to a gruesome forest of impaled victims. Oh, and the rumors whispered of him feasting bread dipped in blood. So, he did enjoy bloody meals. Fast forward to December 1476, and Vlad meets his match in a showdown with the Turks near Bucharest, Romania. Heads roll, literally. His head gets the axe, and it's displayed like a grisly trophy in Constantinople. Decapitation, anyone? Sounds like a failsafe anti-afterlife strategy that could very well have worked for a vampire. Bram Stoker, the puppet master behind the fictional novel, must have drawn inspiration from this unhinged history. The man himself, Vlad, walked that line between reality and the fantastical, leaving a legacy that fuels the vampire lore we adore. Bram Stoker's inspiration, myth to literature. Stoker's inspiration might not be the Transylvanian tales you'd expect. Instead of Romanian legends, the origins of this masterpiece could be closer to home, in Irish horror stories that slumbered in the shadows. Vampires have haunted human minds since ancient times. From Assyria to South America, cultures cooked up beliefs and strategies to fend off these bloodthirsty creatures. In Greece during the 1800s, suspicion even fell on those with red hair. But if we're talking vampiric heartland, Eastern Europe, Romania to be precise, takes the cake. Blame it on the intriguing blend of legends, superstitions, a history soaked in warfare, and the mystical culture of the Roma gypsies. Yet, pause for a moment. Not everyone's convinced Stoker dipped his quill into the well of Vlad the Impaler's tale for inspiration, as he never really visited Romania. Some suggest the connection might be hidden within Stoker's own homeland, Ireland. Surprising, isn't it? Ireland's got its own flirtation with the undead. Consider this. Stoker's childhood in Ireland, a concoction of curious factors, could have stirred the idea. Bram was a frail kid plagued by some mysterious illness. Back in 1840s Ireland, bleeding out a patient was as commonplace as tea. Young Bram might have had a dose of this treatment, and you can bet that the memory lingered. With a writer's knack for turning memories into stories, he might have woven the idea of bleeding into his vampire lore. His mother, Charlotte Blake, hailed from Sligo and championed women's rights. She survived the famine and painted tales of the walking skeletal specters, those living dead. Now, here's the cherry on top. Stoker's original manuscript wasn't titled Dracula, but The Undead. There are even more speculations about the influence of the Irish famine in the creation of Dracula. Famine's merciless grip, pushing desperate souls to the brink. Such was the dire state that even cannibalism wasn't rare. And if that doesn't send shivers down your spine, there's more. A gruesome practice took root, where blood, the essence of life, was sucked from the deceased or the nearly lifeless. Charlotte, Bram Stoker's mother, regaled her son with stories of a cholera outbreak in Sligo. Imagine sufferers sealed in premature graves, an evil attempt to halt the spread of the disease. It's the kind of haunting narrative that seeps into young minds and stays. However, Stoker's Dracula wasn't the debutante of vampire novels. An Irish scribe, Sheridan Le Fanu, unleashed Carmilla in 1871, a tale that wove vampiric threads before Stoker's pen hit paper. Bet your bottom dollar that Stoker took a gander at this chilling precursor. The late 1800s churned out a torrent of novels dabbling in the supernatural, a deluge that surely seeped into Stoker's mind, shaping his narrative. Plus, Stoker himself confessed that a meal of dressed crab at a posh London eatery in the year 1890 thrust him into a nightmare. Blood-sucking creatures, vivid and haunting, danced through his dreams, giving birth to Dracula. Transylvania, the land of dark folklore. Transylvania, a land that straddles myth and reality, with vampires and Dracula dominating the spotlight. But while Dracula is the brainchild of Irish writer Bram Stoker, weaving his dark tale in Dracula, Transylvania spins its own stories. This is a land with a history painted by diverse transient populations that shaped its very vibe. Romanians, Hungarians, Saxons, Ottomans, Jews, and Roma gypsies, a motley crew that walked the terrain of the land behind the forests, molding the landscape of folklore into magic. Now, Transylvania's fame often links it to the lair of Dracula. But vampires, as we know them, weren't part of local tales until Stoker took up his quill. Before Dracula, they were strigoi, as discussed earlier, restless souls that crawled from their graves after sundown, haunting villages and feasting on the living. They are the embodiment of those who met a violent end or faced incomplete Christian rituals during their funerals. The garlic's pungent defense and the soothing incense were believed to repel them. Would you believe these villages where windows and doors are anointed with garlic and the young ones sleep with garlic necklaces? Let's debunk a few more myths. Travelers trek to Transylvania, lured by the shadows they expect to find. Dracula's castle, Vlad's birthplace. These are magnets. But here's the truth. Transylvania is lush and full of life, far from the gloom. Vlad's beginnings remain a complete mystery, so these tours might be selling air. And Bran Castle, well, it's no Dracula's lair. It's had more owners than you can shake a stake at, with Queen Mary herself taking a liking to it. The medieval vibe conjures Vlad's era, but no concrete evidence ties him to the place. Movies and music videos might propagate the castle's Dracula legacy, but truth be told, it's a military hub with a history that dances through time. What does blood symbolize in mythology? The Victorian era, a time when societal norms were a tangled web of beliefs. Imagine sinking your teeth into Bram Stoker's Dracula, a novel that bleeds with symbolism, specifically blood, mixed in a dance of sexuality and gender. Back in those days, talking about certain things like sexuality was as forbidden as peeking into a coffin. Dracula emerged right then, in an era when the lid was tightly shut on public discourse about desire. And guess what Stoker took to center stage? These human desires wrapped in blood. The life force became a mirror to the sexual anxieties brewing in the Victorian psyche. Blood becomes a dual symbol, embodying both desire and purity. Stoker paints the Counts feasting on Lucy and Mina with words that drip with sensuality. It's a dance between vampiric cravings and buried desires. The shared exchange of blood moves between dominance and submission, a cocktail of intimacy laced with violation. But there's more. Amidst the virginal purity of the characters, the Count looms, a sexually charged danger, the embodiment of lust. The act of sipping blood transforms into a metaphor for leaping over boundaries, a plunge into the forbidden waters of chastity's demise. In the pages of Dracula, blood isn't just a fluid coursing through veins. It's a canvas upon which Victorian anxieties about sexuality and gender are painted in hues of desire and dark fascination. Crimson elixir on the rocks. Throughout history, the act of sipping blood has been wrapped in an array of beliefs and customs, a blend of strength-seeking, cultural boundaries, and even medical theories. Way back in ancient times, blood wasn't just liquid, it was a ticket to power. Blood rituals, where gulping or smearing the crimson elixir was believed to transfer life force and vigor from one to another. These practices danced hand in hand with religious ceremonies, a way to appease deities or spirits. Further in the medical arena of yesteryears, bloodletting, the cure-all of the day. An imbalance in fluids, including blood, was thought to trigger illness. Physicians would roll up their sleeves and drain blood, believing it would restore equilibrium. While this practice raised eyebrows and a few scars, it was rooted in the idea of purifying by purging the bad blood. In certain cultures, consuming human blood or flesh was like chugging a magical potion. Some warrior societies practiced ritualistic cannibalism, sipping the blood of fallen foes to borrow their valor. And then our favorite, vampire legends, where sipping blood is a one-way ticket to immortality and superhuman strength. These tales stretch across cultures, painting vampires as creatures fueled by crimson sustenance. They've inspired tales, films, and the pop culture scene. Bloodbound, the knighthood of the vampire world. Across the ages, myths and tales have woven a mesmerizing narrative around the sharing of blood, a potent ritual that binds souls or curses them. In various cultures, the exchange of blood isn't just about swapping fluids. It's a connection that fuses identities or a baton passing of power. As Dracula's victims taste his bite, they plunge into a dark and mystical bond with the vampire himself. This theme paints a vivid picture of transformation, often cloaked in shadows. The victims undergo a shift, losing control over their bodies and minds. The idea of a blood bond reflects a sense of owing something to the vampire. By sharing blood, the victim might owe loyalty, service, or even their own life. This echoes the timeless tale of temptation and the allure of the forbidden. Modern depiction of blood-sucking. Let's start with the familiar. Some modern portrayals honor the tradition of vampires as blood drinkers for vitality. Yet they're not just chugging crimson for kicks. Oh no, they delve deeper, painting the act as an intimate, primal exchange. An act that symbolizes forbidden passion. Think of it as the crimson thread binding romantic relationships between the undead and the living. In modern takes, vampires break from tradition. They explore ethical dilemmas, grappling with the consequences of their actions. Their existence is tangled in morality, challenging clear-cut notions. Consent takes center stage too. These stories openly explore whether the victim willingly agreed or was forced. This focus on consent highlights themes of choice and personal autonomy amid the chaos. In a world where vampires are anything but old news, bloodsucking remains prominent. It serves as a link between tradition and innovation, guiding explorations of complex characters and the unexplored in a constantly changing world. The Church's role, sanctity versus damnation. The vampire, a twisted echo of Christian tales. He dangles the promise of eternal life, much like God, yet with a sinister twist. It's the price of his victim's life force. Instead of the gentle dove of the spirit, he morphs into a bat. Now, you might be tempted to draw the curtain there, clutching your cross and holy water, skirting around the dark corners. But hold on, because monsters are born from cultures, which means the vampire owes his existence to the Church of Dark Ages and the embrace of Christian Europe. Let's unwrap this further. The vampire, often portrayed as male, represents the Church's fear of uncontrolled desires that go beyond its boundaries and seek the forbidden. You see, monsters are like warning signs, pointing to something amiss. And for centuries, the vampire's been whispering in our ears, a chilling reminder that the church struggles with desire. Instead of wrestling with the task of untangling liberation from the grip of oppression, we've taken the easy route, casting aside those on the margins, labeling them as monsters. But here's the bite. In this dance of demonization, we've become the very creatures we claim to shield against. The shadows of our own prejudice have transformed us into the monsters we fear. So, it's not just about neck-biting, it's about a deeper tale. The vampire warns us that the church's battle with desire isn't just on the surface. It's a reflection of our own inner struggle, a battle we must face head-on if we're to escape the cycle of casting out and embrace true liberation.
I won't let you commit genocide.
Dracula in modern pop culture. Vampires reign supreme in the world of horror movie monsters, captivating nerdy hearts since the dawn of cinema. Recent decades brought us gems like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Twilight, and The Vampire Diaries. But the iconic Dracula hasn't basked in pop culture glory since Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 venture, transforming Bram Stoker's novel into a sweeping historical action romance. But change is in the air. Netflix and BBC teamed up for a Dracula miniseries, kicking off the revival. And before the pandemic's dark curtain fell on productions, not one, not two, but 3 Dracula-inspired projects were set to rise. Universal had its eyes on a movie spotlighting Renfield, Dracula's loyal henchman. Over at Blumhouse, they were brewing another Dracula adaptation. And oh, the intrigue. The Brides, a TV show delving into the lives of the women Dracula transformed. It isn't just the screens. Dracula is taking over in comic books as well. Marvel's Captain America, duking it out with Vlad Tepes in Ruins of Ravencroft, Dracula #1, and Image Comics stepping into the ring with the groovy 70s vibe of Dracula. What's sparking this Dracula revival, you ask? Well, let's take a dive. Back in the Victorian era, they resurrected the vampire myth, using it to probe into forbidden corners, sex, class divides, science's showdown with religion. Now, Bram Stoker's Dracula bundled all these threads into a single entity, a chameleon that fits any era like a glove. Vampires have a history of stoking one specific fear, the upper echelons. Drenched in wealth, eternally youthful, they stand poised to feast on the masses. Picture this spectrum. On one end, vampires, on the other, zombies, and sandwiched between, werewolves, the voice of the middle class, ready to howl. When times are sunny, vampires often sway as romantic figures, think Angel and Edward. But when the going gets tough, they morph into outcasts, schemers, aloof aristocrats. True blood, let the right one in. These tales spotlight the terror of being a parasite, of surviving by siphoning human life force. Coppola's Dracula was a romantic hero. But beware, the 2020 resurrection's a whole new ballgame. Gatiss and Moffat's spin amps up the Count's charisma, twined with a hefty dose of ancient self-love. Looking at the Universal's gig, Renfield, picture Dracula's bug-munching sidekick realizing he's neck-deep in a toxic bond with his master. And the Brides, just the title itself screams redemption for the women the Count turned. As for those comic books, Captain America's not exactly buying the whole power and immortality no strings spiel. This vampire lord hasn't stopped here. He's also appeared in some really popular animated shows too. Dracula's animated escapades have been a bit sporadic, cropping up here and there after the 1931 film release. You'd catch him rubbing shoulders with Disney's Mickey Mouse, and even cozying up to Terry Toon's Gandhi Goose. The 1960s saw more of the fanged fellow, popping by in Japan's The Monster Kid and doing quick guest spots in the British show The Beatles, the American classic Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, and the stop-motion wonder Mad Monster Party, 1967. Zooming into the 70s, Dracula joined the animated party in shows like Filmation's The Groovy Ghoulies, where he got a more laid-back, less spooky makeover. But the bloodsucker kept his guest star streak alive, swinging by in the ABC Saturday Superstar movie. He's not done yet. Dracula made his mark across the seas in Japan's Dororon and Makun, served up chuckles on the Pink Panther show, and even joined forces with the challenge of the Super Friends crew. Marvelous verdict. As we close the chapter on the origins of Dracula, we find ourselves standing at the crossroads of history and legend. The journey through the realms of Transylvania and the echoes of forgotten tales have left us with a lingering sense of intrigue. The story of Dracula, made up of a little bit of truth and layered with myths, leaves us to ponder the blurred lines between fact and fiction. From the landscapes of medieval Europe to the pages of history, the journey to uncover the roots of this iconic vampire has been one of both fascination and unease. In the present, the legacy of Dracula endures, casting its shadow across literature, film, and popular culture. But perhaps the true essence of Dracula lies not solely in the creature of the night, but in the human fascination with the unknown. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one. Oh, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.